Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Michael had always been a methodical guy. He liked routine, fixed schedules, stability. He lived with his wife, Grace, and their two young kids, Noah and Lily, in a comfortable house in Henderson, Nevada. Married for over a decade, they seemed, at least from the outside, like a balanced family, one built on partnership. He worked as a project manager at a tech company, holding a steady but demanding job that kept him away from home all day. Grace was a physical therapist who did home visits for her patients, which gave her a more flexible schedule, though no less exhausting. As the kids got older and their work responsibilities grew heavier, it became clear they'd need help. After a few conversations, they decided to hire a babysitter to cover after-school hours and make sure Noah and Lily were safe, well taken care of, and supervised while both parents were out. They were careful in their choice. They didn't want just anyone. They got recommendations, did interviews, and finally settled on Brooke, a 22-year-old studying education, calm, polite, with solid references and a naturally warm way with the kids. From the start, Brooke proved efficient and committed. She took on tasks easily, knew what to do without being told, and quickly won the kids' affection. Noah, the older one, loved playing with her, while Lily, more shy, started calling her my afternoon friend. For Michael and Grace, it was a relief to have someone trustworthy, especially on days when both had overlapping commitments. Her presence helped keep the house running smoothly, without chaos, and created a sense of balance they'd struggled to maintain before. For weeks, things flowed naturally. Brooke arrived on time every day, brought snacks for the kids, helped with homework, and even tidied up small things around the house that weren't part of her job. She didn't just take care of the children, she genuinely seemed to care about the family's well-being. Over time, she started to feel like part of the household. Michael treated her with respect and gratitude, and Grace, initially a bit more reserved, eventually opened up and began chatting with her about everyday things. Everything suggested they'd found the right person. The atmosphere among them seemed harmonious. Grace took advantage of Brooke's presence to accept more appointments, and Michael, in turn, focused on work without worrying about the kids. To any outside observer, it was a well-oiled machine. Quiet dinners, Friday night laughter, Sunday family outings. Nothing hinted at any kind of instability. The house hummed with a quiet peace, the result of a solid, well-established structure. Yet, as the weeks passed, small changes began to appear. Brooke, once always attentive, started to seem a bit more withdrawn. She avoided long conversations with Grace, and at times, when she thought no one was watching, she looked lost in thought, as if carrying something she didn't know how to express. Michael, though focused on work, noticed a certain heaviness in the babysitter's eyes now and then. Nothing obvious, nothing that pointed to a clear problem, but an uncomfortable feeling that something in the air had shifted. Still, he carried on without paying much attention, figuring it might just be fatigue or personal issues on her part. What he didn't know yet was that this subtle shift in Brooke's behavior would mark the beginning of a quiet, deep transformation, one capable of dismantling the entire foundation of security and trust he believed was unshakable. In the past few days, the mood in the house had started to change in a subtle but noticeable way. There were no arguments, no harsh words, but a kind of silent tension had settled in, almost as if the atmosphere carried a weight no one mentioned. Brooke, increasingly reserved, limited herself to what was necessary. Her interactions with Grace became automatic, lacking the ease they once had, and what used to be a relaxed coexistence turned into a cold routine. Michael, observant by nature, began to notice the absence of small gestures, the missing smiles, the growing number of avoided glances. On several occasions, Michael came home late and found Brooke in a hurry to leave, even on days when she used to stay a little longer to play or chat with the kids. Lily started mentioning that Brooke was sad and that she didn't want to play princess like before. Curious, Michael asked if anything had happened, but his daughter's answer was vague. Still, the child's observation lingered in his mind. Grace, on the other hand, didn't seem to notice or show any discomfort. She kept treating Brooke with the same politeness as always, though with a growing distance that became harder to ignore. Their conversations, once filled with natural exchanges about the kids' routines, turned almost mechanical, limited to the basics. Brooke gave only necessary answers and avoided extending the dialogue, especially when Michael wasn't around. One afternoon, Michael came home early from work and caught a quiet moment in the living room. Brooke sat on the couch with her arms crossed, staring at the kitchen doorway with a tense expression. Grace was on the phone, speaking in an almost inaudible tone, pacing back and forth as if trying not to be overheard. When she noticed her husband, she ended the call quickly and gave a forced smile, saying it was a patient wanting to reschedule an appointment. Brooke didn't say a word but stood up and went straight to get the kids' backpacks, as if that moment had sealed something inside her. From then on, the babysitter's restrained behavior intensified. Brooke started leaving the house without saying goodbye to Grace, avoided any kind of interaction, and at times seemed visibly upset. Michael realized something was definitely wrong. A lingering discomfort filled the air whenever the two women shared the same space, but he didn't know where it came from, and that unsettled him. He thought about talking to Brooke, but every time he tried, she backed away with evasive answers. She'd say everything was fine, just school pressure or too many activities, but her expression didn't convince him. It was on a Thursday afternoon, after another seemingly ordinary day, that everything changed. The kids were already playing upstairs when Brooke, slinging her backpack over her shoulder, paused at the kitchen doorway. Michael was putting away some dishes in the cabinet, and when he noticed her hesitation, he asked if she was okay. Brooke took a deep breath, placed her hand on the counter, and with a firm but shaky voice, said she needed to talk to him. She looked him in the eye for a few seconds, as if asking permission to break a silence she'd been holding onto for too long. "I know I shouldn't get involved in your personal life, and I never meant to, but there's something I need to say. I hear things, even when she thinks I'm not paying attention. Every time you're at work, she spends a long time on the phone. But it's not with patients. I hear her whispering, things people don't say to friends. Always speaking quietly, like she's hiding something. I tried to ignore it, thought maybe I was imagining it, but I'm not. Something's wrong. And I can't keep pretending I don't see it." Michael stayed silent, frozen. Brooke's words echoed inside him like a muffled explosion, hard to process. She apologized for speaking up, said she didn't want to cause trouble, and before he could respond, she opened the door and left. He stood there for a few more seconds, staring at the countertop, trying to make sense of what had just happened. That night would be long, and something inside him knew that from this point on, nothing would ever be the same. That evening, the silence in the house felt different. Michael had dinner with the kids as usual, helped Noah with homework, and put Lily to bed, but his mind was elsewhere. Brooke's words replayed with every movement, every breath, like waves that wouldn't stop crashing. He wasn't the kind of man to make rash decisions, but he wasn't naive either. And as much as he wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, something inside told him it wasn't. Grace acted normally. She talked about her day, briefly mentioned a difficult appointment with an elderly patient, then went upstairs to shower. She didn't seem nervous or off. And that's exactly what unsettled him even more. How could she maintain that calm appearance, even after everything she'd done, even if she really was hiding something so serious? Michael felt his stomach tighten. This was the moment. If there was a time to confirm what he needed to know, it was now. He went upstairs quietly, opened the drawer where Grace usually left her phone charging at night, and picked it up. His heart raced as if he were about to commit a crime, even though all he was doing was searching for the truth. Unlocking the device wasn't hard, he knew the password. He avoided opening messages, not wanting to risk deleting anything by accident. He went straight to the Maps app and accessed the location history. His hand was sweaty, his fingers trembling, but the need to know was stronger than any fear. When he opened the weekly log, the locations started appearing. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, every place matched clinics, gyms, patient addresses. But every Wednesday, always around 3 in the afternoon, the same address showed up, repeated for 7 consecutive weeks. Michael clicked on the marker and felt his blood run cold. The address was familiar. Just reading the street name and number was enough to recognize it immediately. It was Matt Reynolds' house. Matt was a colleague of Grace's, also a physical therapist, someone Michael and the family knew. They'd met at events, parties, even casual dinners. Michael had never suspected him. The guy was polite, friendly, and though he talked a lot, he'd never shown anything unusual. Knowing that the name repeating there was his, at that specific time, in such a clear pattern, filled Michael with a mix of anger, humiliation, and disbelief. Still holding the phone, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the screen. The map open, the red dots on Wednesdays lined up like a silent confession. He didn't need anything else. No messages, no calls. This was proof. The coincidences were too many, and Brooke's story, now matching the location pattern, formed a complete and devastating picture. The whispered conversations, the babysitter's discomfort, Grace's indifferent behavior, it all made sense now. The sound of the shower stopped. He heard the bathroom door open and her soft footsteps entering the room. He put the phone back in the drawer and stayed seated, breathing deeply. Grace appeared in the doorway, drying her hair with a towel, saying something trivial about the weather getting colder. Michael watched her in silence, as if seeing her for the first time. On the outside, she was the same. But inside, something had broken forever. And he knew he could no longer delay what needed to be done. Confrontation wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was inevitable. And it would start tonight. Grace moved around the room wrapped in a towel, fiddling with her wet hair, distracted. She mentioned something about a new patient and said she might have to leave early the next day. Michael stayed quiet, listening to every word as if it carried a hidden meaning. He wasn't interested in small talk, nor was he willing to pretend normalcy still existed between them. When she walked past him to grab a change of clothes, he slowly lifted his head and asked, his voice firm, not loud but carrying a seriousness she wasn't used to. "Why have you been going to Matt Reynolds' house every Wednesday afternoon?" Grace stopped moving. She stood with her back turned for a moment, completely still. Then she turned slowly, her expression a forced mix of surprise and attempted control. "What? What are you talking about? Where did you get that?" Michael held her gaze without blinking. He said he knew. That he'd seen it in her phone's location history. That it didn't make sense to deny it. She still tried to keep up the act, said maybe the phone had recorded it wrong, or that she might have left it with someone at the clinic, anything to cast doubt. But her eyes were trembling. Her mouth searched for words that didn't come naturally. And Michael didn't back down. He named the neighborhood, the house number, the days and times. He said he knew it wasn't coincidence and that there was no point in pretending anymore. That's when she broke. She dropped the damp towel on the bed, sat down in the bedroom armchair, and covered her face with her hands like someone giving up a fight. She took a deep breath and, in a weak voice, confessed. She said the affair with Matt started after a physical therapy event. He reached out to talk about a project, they started messaging, met a few times to discuss ideas, and without realizing it, got involved in something she couldn't control. She said Matt was attentive, complimented her work, showed real interest, and that made her feel seen, valued, something she said she hadn't felt in a long time. She admitted they always met at his place, on Wednesday afternoons, when she claimed to be seeing patients. She said at first she thought it would just be conversation, but then she couldn't pull herself out. She admitted she knew it was wrong, that she felt terrible, but the involvement had grown into something she couldn't manage anymore. She insisted she never wanted to destroy the family, that she still loved Michael, but that she'd lost herself in a moment of weakness. She spoke quickly, her sentences broken, trying to turn guilt into regret, justifications into emotional excuses. Michael listened without interrupting. His eyes fixed on her, his body stiff, his mind already far beyond that room. When she finished, he didn't shout, didn't argue, didn't ask for more explanations. He simply said, in a flat voice, that she would leave the house the next morning. That he'd call his lawyer and start divorce proceedings. That what they had was over, along with any trace of trust that had ever existed. He said the kids would be the priority, and he'd handle everything to make sure their environment wasn't affected more than it already had. Grace tried to stand and move toward him. She said she wanted to fix things, that she was willing to do anything, that she just needed a chance. But Michael stepped back. He told her to stop. That at that moment, anything she said would sound empty. He said what she'd destroyed wasn't just their marriage, but the emotional foundation of someone who believed he was safe in his own home. He asked her to respect his decision and leave the rest of the conversation to the lawyers. Then he walked out of the room. Grace stayed alone, staring at the closed door. For the first time, the silence in the room wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the undeniable presence of a reality she couldn't undo. The next morning, Grace packed a small suitcase, grabbed some clothes and documents, and left the house quietly. There were no formal goodbyes, no final words. Michael had made everything clear the night before, and she knew pushing further would be pointless. She went to her mother's house and stayed there temporarily. She tried to keep some composure, but the truth was she still couldn't grasp the full extent of the rupture. There had been no fights, no yelling, no scandals. But there was an unshakable decision, made with the coldness of someone deeply wounded. In the first few days, she tried to reconnect with Matt. She sent messages, called twice, even suggested they meet. But his response was distant. He replied with short phrases, avoided any serious conversation, and soon stopped answering her messages altogether. Matt had never intended to go beyond their secret. Without the cover of secrecy, the affair meant nothing to him. Grace realized, too late, that she was alone. Matt simply disappeared, making it clear that what they had was nothing more than a selfish, convenient distraction. The divorce was initiated that same week. Michael acted with clarity, prioritizing the kids and setting up a shared custody agreement. The children would spend part of the week with him and part with Grace, keeping their school routines and extracurricular activities mostly unchanged. Despite the pain, he didn't want Noah and Lily to carry the burden of the separation unnecessarily. Grace accepted the proposed terms without resistance. She knew fighting it would only prolong a story that was already over. In the months that followed, Michael reorganized his life with his kids as the main focus. Brooke stayed involved in their daily lives, helping with the transition in a way that surprised him given her age. She handled the kids with kindness and firmness. She was the one who helped Lily understand why her mom now lived in another house, and who comforted Noah when he cried silently, unsure what to say. Her presence became essential during that rebuilding phase. When the most turbulent period passed, Brooke finished her education degree and received a job offer at a private school in the city. She accepted enthusiastically and gradually stepped back from the household routine. She stayed in touch with Michael, but always with respect and clarity. There was never any confusion. Between them, a solid friendship remained, built on gratitude and mutual trust. Grace, meanwhile, faced a harsh reality. She moved into a small rented apartment near her mother's house. Visits from the kids, though frequent due to the custody agreement, didn't fill the emotional void she'd created. Noah kept a certain distance, polite but without the ease they once had. Lily was still affectionate but was starting to ask hard questions, like why Dad didn't want them all living together anymore. Grace tried to stay strong, but loneliness weighed heavily. Matt's name became a ghost, a constant reminder of a choice that destroyed everything she'd built. Michael, on the other hand, found a new balance. He adjusted his work schedule, started picking the kids up from school more often, and created routines just for them. He discovered new habits, reconnected with old friends, and above all, rebuilt his own identity. The pain of betrayal didn't vanish, but it changed into something that no longer defined him. He learned that security doesn't come from routine, but from truth. And that trusting someone isn't about closing your eyes, but about being willing to face whatever needs to be faced, when it needs to be faced. Time passed. The house grew quieter, but also lighter. Wounds healed through daily presence, care, and small victories in real life. Nothing went back to how it was. But in a way, everything was exactly where it needed to be. Because in the end, it was the breakup that brought to light what could never be ignored again. The truth. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.